been quiet in the world of BC transfer portal news, but on Thursday, Boston College lands a quarterback. A little bit of a surprise here, and we're going to get into why it's important on today's Locked On BC.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, you guys are always into transfer portal news, and we got a big one today as BC lands a commitment from FIU quarterback Grayson James. And to talk about it, we brought on Mitch Wolf, staff writer at Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
Going well. Excited to be back on the show. Talk about the whole transfer class. As we get deeper into January, things are kind of solidifying. Obviously, the shakeup in the coaching world is kind of having cascading effects throughout the landscape. So we'll probably see things keep going in the next few weeks, but it's definitely slowing down compared to what it was in late December and even early January.
So let's kick this off. Grayson James, quarterback from FIU, was a starter in 2022, threw for about, 1,200 yards, had 11 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, commits to BC. What is your thought about this quarterback and what his role will be on this roster?
So I think a while ago on the Eagle Insider message board, there was discussion about whether BC should be looking at bringing in a quarterback via the portal, because as of right now, Thomas Castellanos is the only quarterback on the roster who's taken live snaps in an FBS game. Jacoby Robinson redshirted last year. Matthew Reeve has been on the roster for a few years, but hasn't played at all. And I felt that was pretty low on their priority list, given that, and more so from an external perspective, in that it's going to be hard to get a transfer to come to BC because Castellanos is pretty entrenched as the starter, although we did think that Moorhead was entrenched as the starter last year. So take that with a grain of salt. But he seems to be the guy. So it's going to be hard for them to convince somebody to come to BC and say, hey, we want you to come here, but you're probably not going to play a lot. Also, the school's going to be a lot harder. And also, the weather usually isn't that great. So that's a bit of a tough sell. In the case of Grayson James, he kind of played the role of Emmett Moorhead seemingly last year for FIU, in that he didn't begin the year as a starter, took over pretty early on in 2022, had a mixed bag of performances, I'll say, and obviously it's against much lower competition. This year he is the starter entering the year, but really that only lasts one game, and then he only appears in 3 games total, so he technically redshirted last year. I only got a chance to watch 2 games of his, one from 2022, one from 2023, and he looks more like a quarterback in that he's 6'3", 235, so he looks more kind of like your prototypical size. Has some athleticism, can run some of the quarterback run stuff BC wants to do in the event that Thomas Castellanos would go down. So you don't have to completely overhaul your offense if the worst were to happen. But overall, I think there seems to be a reason that he's transferring out of FIU, in that he just really wasn't that great as a passer. He had some games here and there, but a lot of his yards came on run after the catch stuff. He had some nice throws, but his receivers also weren't very good. They had a lot of drops. So it's a little hard to evaluate him, but I think it's pretty clear he's coming in as the backup. Get a chance to play some Power 5 competition, maybe in blowouts. Maybe he coming out of high school, he did have offers from Dartmouth and Columbia and a bunch of other FCS G5 programs. So clearly a smart kid, comes from a very prestigious high school in Duncanville, Texas, had a lot of success there. So I think there's something there, but I think that, in the event that if he had to take over as a starter, then the expectations for BC season would have to be significantly diminished.
Yeah, you look at what he came from. For those folks wanting to know, he was an Elite 11 finalist, which I was surprised when I found that out. For the folks that don't know what that is, that's a quarterback competition where, he was going against, I found the names of some of the people in his class. It was Drake May, Brock Vandegrift, Caleb Williams. So he was one of the 20 finalists in that group because he played for Duncanville and threw for 4,000 yards and like 50 touchdowns. his junior year. So he had the high school pedigree to be a big prolific passer, just hasn't had it. And you were mentioning it, his junior year or sophomore year when he was a first starter. You look at his game by game stats, and it's like Jekyll and Hyde. Like he had games where he's like 3 touchdowns, zero interceptions, and then a whole bunch of 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So you're gonna have to hope that Steve Shimko can play a little bit of magic here and maybe fix a few things with him and get him ready. But when you're looking at what you needed here, this guy fits. I don't know what your thoughts are, but this is probably as good as you're going to get in terms of guy bringing in a quarterback that has some experience.
Yeah, and he has 2 years of eligibility left, so it's not somebody like Jeff Sims who would be coming from Nebraska, who has played a lot, but this is really their last gasp, and you really know what you have with Jeff Sims, in that he's a turnover machine. With James, there is at least a little bit of upside that you can maybe capitalize on. But yeah, I think the market for backup quarterbacks in transfer portal is very weird, because again, it's hard to sell a guy on being a backup, and that's kind of where you have to maybe go look at some group of 5 starters who have been inconsistent. Say, hey, come to Power 5. Maybe you can get some playing time, or you're just a backup here, and maybe get a better degree and have a better outlook on life moving forward.
Right, and I think the thing to think about this too is it's a depth piece. So you bring him in practice, and you figure out, oh, maybe this isn't working. Then you go with Jacoby Robinson. You go with one of your other guys. It would probably be Robinson at this point, but you have other options if he doesn't work out. This isn't like you're going into the season with this kid as your quarterback. You're bringing him in to battle with probably Jacoby Robinson during spring ball, and you'll figure out who wins. And he's going to stay here for a year, and I'm sure he'll probably graduate after this year. And then if it doesn't work out, if say Robinson beats him out, he could transfer again, and find another job somewhere else. So just my thoughts there.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the world we live in now, is you can get on, and even now that they repealed the ruling about not being able to transfer multiple times before you graduate. So it really is the Wild West out there. So, again, good to get a body in there who actually has taken some snaps, played some games against FBS competition. So it's not just some guy who's coming in completely new to the game at this level.
And now, in a moment, we're going to step away from the Grayson James news and talk a little bit about the transfer portal class itself. And we're going to have Mitch come on and talk about his rankings and who's going to be who he predicts to be the most productive and most needed players on this roster. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Locked on BC, AJ Black here. And again, we're here with Mitch, and we're talking about the transfer portal class, which is now up to 10 players. And they're not done yet. There's probably going to be some more visitors coming up. Maybe not for the spring ball, but you'll have other kids, especially after the end of spring practice, possibly recruiting coming in. So there's a chance that this class could get to what we've heard could be anywhere from 12 to 15 transfers, bigger than last year. Now, Mitch, I gave you an assignment. I wanted you to rank the transfers based on what you project them out to be in terms of impact on this roster. We'll start with the back end. Starting with number 10, who would you put?
So we're going to stay with the same name. It's going to be Grayson James. Just that I don't expect him to play much, if at all, this season. Obviously, yeah, in the FCS game, if they take Castellanos out after the first half and he gets some playing time, cool. Maybe if the Western Kentucky game turns into a blowout, put him in then. Or if on the other end BC's getting blown out and they want to just keep Castellanos healthy, put in James, and maybe he plays a game here and there, but. Ultimately, I don't expect him to make a big impact, and I frankly just hope that he doesn't play a ton of snaps, because if that happens, that means something bad happened with Thomas Castellanos, who really is the future of this program for the next few years.
All right. We already kind of talked about James. Number 9.
All right. So number 9 is Jordan McDonald, the running back from UCF, Thomas Castellanos' former classmate when he was there. And again, kind of just a depth thing where I expect Kai Robichaux to remain as a starter. I expect another guy we'll talk about later to be the number 2 guy, and then you still have Alex Broom. So you have 3 guys at least ahead of him in the depth chart. You still have Datrell Jones. I'm not sure kind of what his role will be. McDonald is, though, he is the bigger back. So I imagine that if they do need a thumper late in games and Robichaux is hurt or something, then you put in McDonald and he gives you that kind of skill set. But again, I think just in terms of the number of snaps, the number of touches that these players will get, I have Jordan McDonald pretty low on the list. But he is a younger player, so after next year when Robichaux and Treshaun Ward, who we'll talk about later, move on as they're both graduate students, it'll be McDonald and Broom kind of as the 1-2 punch. And I think that could be an interesting backfield pairing.
All right. I agree with you there. I think again, you have 2 depth pieces at number 10 and at 9. Who do you have at number 8?
This is where it starts to actually get, I think, interesting in terms of guys who are going to play a good bit. I'm going to go with Sed McConnell, who's pictured on the screen here, the interior defensive lineman transfer from Illinois. He's a bit of a tweener, kind of like George Rooks was when he transferred in last year. And again, kind of just a depth thing. Interested to see where he fits in this rotation. Is he Rooks' direct backup? How much are they going to play that kind of lighter 3-tech defensive tackle when you still have guys like Quan Williams, Nigel Tate, even Owen Stroudmeyer, and the redshirt freshman Eric Stautry? I am intrigued to see if BC does a little more experimenting and gets more versatile with their fronts in terms of playing more odd 3-down lineman fronts where you have Cam Horsley as the nose tackle, and then you have a guy like Sed McConnell and a guy like George Rooks, who are kind of those tweeners, but you have them playing as what are called 4 techniques or 4-eye techniques, where they're directly over or directly across from the offensive tackles or just slightly shaded on the inside. I'm wondering if they're going to see some of those fronts. So maybe a guy like McConnell plays more in that kind of front. But given that that's a question, I'll still have him pretty low in the rankings.
Interesting. Yeah, when I see depth pieces, I think of him as possibly one of the last ones. Like, not someone that when he committed, I didn't think of McConnell as someone that I was like, oh, this guy's going to jump right into the starting rotation and be a dominant inside interior off defensive lineman. I'm like, oh, this is a guy that's got experience that can play some stuff and maybe earn himself more playing time as it goes along. But yeah, I agree with you. I'd put him near the bottom as well.
Yeah, think of him as kind of the Chris Banks replacement. I would say both enroll in like place on the depth chart where they are just kind of a rotational player. Next up is, and I feel like this might surprise some people, but is going to be Jaden McGowan, the speedy wide receiver transfer from Vanderbilt. A lot of hullabaloo about him, given his process transferring away from Vanderbilt and originally committing to South Carolina and then ending up at BC. But though when this whole thing was going down, I was still kind of surprised that this was all happening, because given that BC had already gotten a big transfer commit in Jeland Bradley, we'll talk about later, and that the wide receiver room was probably one of the deeper position groups on the team, given that you are bringing Lewis Bond back, you get Joseph Griffin back, you get Dino Tomlin back, you have young guys like Jaden Skeet, Ish Samore, even Nate Johnson and Reed Harris, who played sparingly last year. So I was kind of a little confused as to why this was happening, but and even though this guy has had, his production has been a little inconsistent, especially against SEC opponents. I think just having that kind of raw speed that can attack the defense vertically, be useful, especially in the return game, that'll be huge. He can be that guy that can have some of those design touches and make life easier in Thomas Castellanos, which we saw this past year when Ryan O'Keefe went down. The offense kind of started to sputter, particularly in the passing game, because they didn't have that guy that could really take the top off the defense.
Oh, interesting. I'm expecting a bigger role out of him. I do think he's going to play a bigger spot, especially I feel like with what Castellanos went with a lot last year and the success he had with O'Keefe. I think McGowan could play a bigger role, but I'm interested to see how big a role the next one you have is. Number 6. Go ahead.
So my number 6 is Kamari Morales, the tight end from North Carolina, and I have him very high because this is a veteran guy who can really stabilize that position. I'd say Jeremiah Franklin had flashes last year both as infinitely better than he was in 2022. But flashes as a receiver, flashes as a blocker, but still a little inconsistent. Especially once George Takis went down, he was kind of having to play a role that didn't necessarily fit his skill set. And to be frank, Morales doesn't necessarily fit that Takis mold either. He's not the biggest guy. He's not going to be a dominant inline run blocker, but he's a solid enough blocker. And I think if the coaching staff uses him properly, he can be, pretty solid in that role as kind of an H-back / fullback type of player. And also just a very, very reliable receiver, especially over the middle. We had a lot of issues with George Takis and drops this last year, and frankly had some issues with that too. So you get a guy like Morales who's very reliable over the middle, can be that check down option. If Thomas Castellanos is not able to run and he just needs to get the ball out, you find a guy like Morales who you can rely on to catch the ball and then get upfield, and he's not going to have huge gains, but he can break through a tackle, get some yards after contact, and just keep the offense on schedule. And I think that's why I have him above McGowan, in that I see his role a little more clearly. And I think that that's going to be more important for this offense in the long term. I think if you factored in McGowan's role in special teams as a returner, you probably could very easily make the argument that he could be ranked above him. But I just like what Morales brings in terms of a high floor guy who can, again, improve the reliability and consistency of this offense.
All right. In our final segment, Mitch and I are going to wrap things up with his top 5. Who's the most impactful transfer? You're going to have to wait to hear what he has to say in just a moment. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. If you're watching the NFL playoffs this weekend, you're thinking the Baltimore Ravens, you love your Zay Flowers pick, you could pick an anytime touchdown pick, get Zay Flowers and win yourself some money. If you think that Lamar Jackson's going to throw over a certain amount, there's over-unders on that. You can do the parlay and say, Jackson over a certain amount of yards and Zay Flowers with a touchdown. Your imagination is the limit. So go over to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up here on Locked On Boston College. Again, AJ Black here. And Mitch is giving us his top 5 transfers coming in. Mitch, go ahead. Why don't you start this off?
So my number 5 is a guy that we talked about before. It's Treshaun Ward, the running back from Florida State, or Kansas State, actually, then Florida State previously. And again, I do really like Treshaun Ward's game. I've been aware of him for a few years now. He's been around a while. Very versatile back, very hardworking guy, tough runner, has the ability to convert runs into like big chunk runs with his speed. But this is going to be about Kai Robichaux being the lead back, getting the lion's share of the carries. And also you have Thomas Castellanos considers obviously going to run the ball a lot. So, kind of see what Ward is going to do. And obviously he'll be contending with Alex Broom for those kind of third down back snaps and touches, if you will. So I do really like his game. And, if in the event that Robichaux does need a breather or goes down with an injury, I think Ward can step in and be pretty solid. But I just think that because of that kind of logjam at the position and having a guy like Robichaux who is so productive and more versatile than he's given credit for, he is a solid receiver, he is a pretty good blocker. His ceiling is just limited in terms of how much he's going to be able to do given his position on the depth chart.
It's going to be interesting to see what he can bring to that run game. But I see with you with Robichaux. He's definitely got that spot locked down. All right, number 4.
Number 4, and this is going to be a run on guys in the secondary. Number 4 is Cam Martinez from Ohio State. I've just been a bit of a kerfuffle about him transferring, as I don't think he's enrolled yet, so people are worried. But everything seems to be going along swimmingly. It's just a logistical issue. But Martinez is interesting because he is built very similarly to Kari Johnson, the transfer from last year from Arkansas, who played a decent bit. Had some issues with injuries, so kind of playing time was a bit inconsistent, but similar build, kind of a similar player in that he has some safety experience, has some slot experience, can kind of move around, but saw his playing time decrease at Ohio State as they kind of settled on to the guys they liked after Hafley left, but was a Hafley recruit, very highly recruited player. And I think he's a guy that can come in and stabilize the secondary, given that he is a high caliber Power 5 athlete and can, upgrade over some of the, FCS players that were playing there last year and had some struggles.
So yeah, for folks that are wondering, Cameron Martinez is not enrolled yet. I don't get the impression that he's going to go anywhere else, but just for folks, like all the other transfers that we're talking about are on campus. I think the quarterback is too. I haven't gotten confirmation on that one yet, but I know Cam Martinez is the last one, and I don't think it's a big issue like like Bashal Tutin last year, where he may just disappear. I think it'll be.
It seems like it might be like him trying to. It's easier for him to stay at Ohio State, finish up his credits there, then just graduate, as opposed to like trying to transfer to BC for a semester early and then have that all get messed up. But again, he's a veteran guy. Obviously, Hafley knows him pretty well. I think he probably can trust that. If he has to come in the summer, he's going to be able to pick up the defense pretty quickly.
All right, you said it's going to be a run on secondary. I have a guess. Is your next one Ryan Turner?
Yeah, the guy on the screen right now, the other cornerback from Ohio State. Again, a guy that kind of just lost his place in the depth chart at Ohio State. Played sparingly, was a highly recruited player, but just at the end of the day, Ohio State's playing some 5-star, really top level guys, and even if you're just a tier below that, you're going to struggle to get playing time. But I really like Ryan Turner's potential. Has inside outside versatility in terms of playing in the slot. I think he's going to be contending for a starting spot in the secondary in this year, and even if he doesn't lock down one of the outside starting spots, I think he's going to play a lot as the slot cornerback. So I think you're going to see a lot of Ryan Turner. I like what he can do. And even in the case, maybe Amari Jackson beats him out as the starting outside cornerback on one side, I think he can just be the slot guy. And I think regardless in nickel packages, he'll be the slot guy. So excited to see what he can bring. And again, bring some more consistency, some more speed and athleticism to the secondary.
All right. And let's continue this going. Number two
is another secondary guy. It's Bryquise Brown from Georgia State, brother of Bruce Brown, the NBA player. And luckily Brown is a much more veteran player. He's mostly an outside cornerback at Georgia State. So there was a lot of film and games I could watch of him. And I was very impressed with what I saw for a G5 player. His 2022 was better than his 2023. And part of the issue with this 2023 season is he got absolutely torched by Malik Neighbors of LSU. But, Malik Neighbors was torching most guys, and he's probably going to be a top 10 pick in this upcoming NFL draft. So I can give a bit of a pass there. But Brown kind of reminds me of the Elijah Jones we saw in 2021 and maybe the earlier part of 2022, where physical guy, very willing tackler, probably more comfortable in zone than man, occasionally gets beat deep with speed or very complex routes with a lot of double moves that you're not going to see a ton of. But again, guy that's going to bring stability to the secondary, can be relied upon to say, hey, you can go out there and cover most number one receivers and be serviceable. Like occasionally, you're going to get beat. We'll see what we can do to mitigate that. But I like him as a player. I like that he's going to be replacing Elijah Jones, I would think, as one of the starting outside corners, and brings a lot of experience to that position.
All right. And drum roll, please. Who is your most impactful? Who do you expect to have the biggest impact on this team as a transfer?
My number one is Jeland Bradley, the wide receiver from Texas Tech, who I am very, very, very excited about. This guy's 6'5", about 220-ish. Big, and when you turn on the film, even though Texas Tech does have a lot of big, tall receivers, it's very easy to find him because he is just so big and long, and he has this kind of unorthodox stance before the snap because he just has to put his legs so far apart, and he covers almost 3 yards between his 2 feet, which is crazy. But this is kind of the guy that I think BC really wants Joseph Griffin to turn into, in that he is this big contested catch receiver who can also threaten vertically just because of his strides being so long. But again, the thing that I just like is that he is very reliable in terms of just catching the ball, which is something BC obviously had a lot of issues with last year. And this is a guy that, again, Thomas Castellanos can target downfield, can take the top off the defense and win at the catch point in contested catch situations. He's also an absolute menace as a blocker, which obviously is, maybe not as important as some of the other things you need for an elite wide receiver. But I just like watching receivers who do this. And I think I've sent you some clips where once a game, he'll just send a defensive back flying. And it's really fun to watch. So especially in BC's run heavy offense, where they do like having that big X that can occasionally motion in and be a blocker, I think that he'll get used that way a ton. And also, if you look at like Texas Tech message boards and stuff, they were disappointed to lose him and that he's a very good player, but they kind of understood why he was leaving, just because coaching offensive staff changed, quarterback position in flux. And so they got there like, man, this, like, you guys got a good one. And I think that's encouraging to see. I know he had a much, again, better 2022 than 2023. And I think a lot of that was the quarterback position, but this guy's a really impressive player. And I think he's going to quickly become a fan favorite among BC fans. Cause it's cool to watch when you watch film from the all 22 angle, because you do see a lot more, and you can see that this guy is a very demonstrative player, especially in a positive way for the entire offense. Very quick to celebrate with his teammates, very emphatic, with, getting involved with plays. So I think just kind of bringing that attitude to the offense is going to be huge.
All right, we're going to wrap things up here. Mitch, where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. You can also check out my work on Eagle Insider. We'll be kind of previewing the every offense or every position in the offseason, see kind of where they stand now that the portal season is kind of winding down. We'll obviously have still a few things recapping the 2023 season come out, just waiting on some information. And then, it's getting into draft season. So, BC is going to have a few players are going to go in the draft. So we'll have some content previewing that and looking at where those players will end up at the next level.
Thank you so much for coming on, Mitch. We'll be back again later tonight. I'm going to have BC Hockey Blogger on to talk about the BC Eagles and recap the Providence games and look ahead to their weekend matchup against Merrimack. And the Eagles added a new recruit. He'll give us a little bit of an update on that. Thank you all so much for following us here at Locked On BC. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Again, go to Eagle Insider. You find all of us, BC Hockey Blogger, me, Beacon Street Ball. We have a great staff building here. Become a member. It's like, $5 a month right now. Get all of our access. And thank you all so much for making Locked On Boston College your first listen. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day.